All right, let's jump right into another deep dive. This time, we're heading into Chapter 4 of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
Oh, this one's packed with so much good stuff.
Yeah, you guys sent in a ton of interesting material, lesson plans, timelines, character analyses, and even a few alternative interpretations of the chapter. We're going to try to create a kind of cheat sheet for teachers.
Sounds like a plan.
You know, it's amazing how much depth there is in these books. I've read them a bunch of
Yeah,
times, and every time I discover something new.
definitely. It's one of the things that makes the series so rereadable. Even in this chapter, which seems kind of light and fun on the surface, Rowling is planting seeds for all these darker themes that'll come up later.
Absolutely. Right from the start, we get that contrast between the Dursleys' place and the Burrow, the Weasleys' home. Talk about a clash of worlds.
Oh, yeah, that contrast is so deliberate. It's like Rowling showing us the difference between these two forces that are vying for Harry. The oppressive, restrictive world of the Dursleys and the chaotic but welcoming magic of the Weasley family.
It's like Privet Drive is the symbol of all the negativity and prejudice that Harry has to overcome, and the Burrow is this safe haven where he can be himself.
Exactly. And it's not just about the physical descriptions of the houses either. It's about the atmosphere, the energy. The Burrow is messy and full of life, while Privet Drive is all sterile and suffocating.
And the Weasleys themselves are so different from the Dursleys. Even though they don't have a lot of money, they're overflowing with love and generosity.
Right. That brings up a really interesting point about economic disparity in the wizarding world. Rowling doesn't shy away from showing us that even in this magical society, there are families who struggle financially.
And it's done so subtly, it's not like she's hitting us over the head with it. It's in the little details, like the Weasleys' near-empty vault at Gringotts,
Yeah.
or Mrs. Weasley having to make do with secondhand supplies.
Exactly. And then you have Lucius Malfoy, who's practically dripping with wealth and disdain, sneering at the Weasleys' lack of funds.
Oh yeah, that guy is trouble from the moment he appears. And it's interesting how Rowling uses him to represent everything the Weasleys oppose.
Totally. He's obsessed with pureblood lineage, material possessions, and social status. He's basically the embodiment of the elitist, prejudiced side of the wizarding world.
And that whole clash of values comes to a head in that scene at Flourish and Blotts, doesn't it? You've got Gilderoy Lockhart, all flash and no substance, being exactly the kind of wizard Lucius Malfoy admires.
Oh, Lockhart is such a fascinating character. He's basically a walking, talking facade, obsessed with fame and appearances. And the fight between Arthur Weasley and Lucius Malfoy in that setting, it's like a mini version of the bigger war that's brewing between those who follow Voldemort and those who oppose him.
Whoa, you're right. I never thought about it that way before. Okay, so we've got these contrasting worlds, this theme of economic disparity and this simmering conflict. But what about that whole accidental trip to Nocturne Alley? The atmosphere there is so creepy.
Oh, Nocturne Alley is pure foreshadowing, my friend. It's dark, sinister, full of dangerous shops and shady characters, and Hagrid practically dragging Harry out of there. It's a clear warning sign that there are darker forces at play in the wizarding world.
Not to mention the fact that we see Lucius Malfoy there, selling off some dark artifacts. That definitely foreshadows his connection to the darker side of magic.
Absolutely. It's like a little peek behind the curtain, revealing the underbelly of the wizarding world. And speaking of characters, we meet so many in this chapter. Lockhart, the Weasleys, the Malfoys. How do they all contribute to the themes we've been talking about?
Yeah, it's like a who's who of the wizarding world. Each
Yeah.
one brings something different to the table, right?
Absolutely. Like Ginny Weasley, she's so shy and awkward around Harry, but it hints at the bigger role she'll play later on. And Percy, he's so ambitious and rule-focused, which foreshadows his eventual split from his family. And then there's the twins, Fred and George. They add so much humor, even amidst all the tension.
They definitely lighten the mood.
Well,
Okay, let's zoom back in on that confrontation between Arthur Weasley and Lucius Malfoy at Flourish and Blotts. You said it was more than just a personal disagreement, right?
oh, absolutely. It's symbolic of the larger clash between acceptance and prejudice that's at the heart of the entire series.
Yeah.
You've got Arthur, who's all about equality and fighting for what's right, even though he doesn't have a lot of money. And then you have Lucius, who embodies bigotry, discrimination, and the whole pure blood supremacy thing.
Wow, it's so much deeper than just a fight over a spilled book.
Right. It's a microcosm of the battle that's going on throughout the wizarding world. And it shows that this battle isn't just about individual wizards, it's about fundamental values and beliefs.
So much to unpack in just one chapter. It's incredible how Rowling manages to pack so much meaning into seemingly simple events.
That's the genius of her writing. She makes it look effortless, but there's so much depth and nuance there if you know where to look.
Okay, now let's talk about how teachers can bring this chapter to life for their students. What are some key strategies they can use?
Well, first of all, they can really leverage those contrasting settings. Have students analyze the language Rowling uses to describe the Burrow and Privet Drive. What do those differences tell us about the characters and the values each place represents?
That's a great idea. Students could even create visual representations of the two homes, highlighting the stark contrast. But how can teachers tackle the sensitive topic of financial disparity?
It's about fostering open discussions and encouraging empathy. They can guide students in exploring the Weasleys' financial struggles and how Lucius Malfoy weaponizes their economic status. It's a chance to explore themes of social justice and economic inequality, even within this magical world.
And what about the element of foreshadowing? How can teachers help students recognize and analyze those subtle clues Rowling drops throughout the chapter?
Nocturne Alley is a goldmine for that. Encourage them to play detective, identifying clues that hint at future conflicts and dangers. They could predict what challenges Harry might face based on his experience there. It'll sharpen their critical thinking skills and keep them engaged with the narrative.
And what about specific activities? Are there any exercises that can help students delve deeper into this chapter?
Absolutely. The lesson plan you provided suggests some great activities. Short answer quizzes can assess comprehension, while essay questions encourage deeper analysis. And consider some creative writing prompts. Have them write from Draco's perspective during that brawl, or a diary entry from Ginny revealing her feelings about Harry.
Oh, those are great ideas. I love how they cater to different learning styles and let students express their understanding in creative ways. Anything else teachers should keep in mind when teaching this chapter?
Don't forget the FAQ section you sent. It's full of answers to common student questions, which can be a lifesaver for teachers, especially those who are new to the series.
It's like a magical lifeline. Before we move on, is there a key takeaway that teachers should focus on when teaching this chapter?
The core message is about understanding those contrasting worlds, the light and dark, the acceptance and prejudice. They need to help students see how those elements are introduced and developed in this chapter, because they're going to resonate throughout the whole series.
It's all about laying the groundwork for a deeper understanding of these complex themes that unfold in the later books.
Exactly. Remember, teaching Harry Potter isn't just about analyzing the plot. It's about sparking imagination, critical thinking, and a love of reading.
It's about embracing the magic. But before we get too carried away, we got to take a break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more insights into Chapter 4.
All right, so let's get back to those teaching strategies we were discussing. Remember that contrast between the Burrow and Privet Drive?
Oh yeah, the clash of the cozy and the creepy.
Exactly. Teachers can really dig into that. Like, imagine asking your students, how does Rowling use language to create such different vibes in these two settings?
It's like a lesson in descriptive writing, right?
Yeah. Totally. Get them to pick out specific words and phrases that make the Burrow feel warm and welcoming versus Privet Drive, which feels cold and oppressive.
They could even draw pictures maybe, or make collages to show that contrast.
Oh, I love that idea. Visual learners would totally eat that up. But what about that whole thing with money? How do you talk about financial differences with, like, younger kids?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. It's a sensitive topic.
It is, but it's important. You got to approach it with care. But you can use it to have some really meaningful discussions. Like, compare Harry's experience at Gringotts with the Weasleys. What does that tell us about their situations?
It shows how much money, or lack of it, impacts the choices they make.
Exactly. And it connects to real-world issues, too, things kids might be seeing around them. Plus, you can't ignore how Lucius Malfoy acts. All those snide comments about secondhand stuff and the Weasleys being a disgrace to wizarding society.
He's just awful.
Right. But it shows how deeply ingrained this prejudice can be. It's not just about money, it's about using someone's financial status to make them feel less than.
It makes you wonder why someone like Malfoy even needs to put others down like that. What's he trying to prove?
That's a great question for discussion. And hey, let's circle back to foreshadowing. Remember that creepy Nocturne Alley scene?
Oh yeah, that was a good one. So much suspense.
It's like a puzzle box. Ask your students. What feels so off about this place? What clues is Rowling giving us about the dangers hiding in the wizarding world?
They could make like an evidence board, connecting those details to things that happen later, even in other books.
That's a brilliant idea. It gets them thinking like detectives, piecing together clues and anticipating what's to come. Okay, so we talked about contrasting settings and foreshadowing. What about those activities in the lesson plan, those quizzes and essays?
Yeah, how can those be used effectively?
So the quizzes are great for a quick check. Do they get the main points? The essay questions, though, those really push them to analyze things.
Give me an example.
Sure, something like, compare the Dursleys' house with the Weasleys. What do those settings reveal about the characters and their values?
Oh, that's a good one. It makes them think about what those houses really represent.
Exactly. And don't forget about creative writing. Have them imagine their Draco during that fight. Or maybe write a diary entry from Ginny about how she feels about Harry.
I love those prompts. It lets them get inside the characters' heads and really explore the story from different angles.
Right. And don't forget that FAQ section you sent. It's a lifesaver for teachers, especially those who are new to Harry Potter.
It's like a cheat sheet for tackling those common questions that come up. Speaking of characters, is there anything specific teachers should highlight about them?
Each one, even the minor ones, adds something to the themes of the chapter. Lockhart, for example. He's not just there for laughs. He shows how dangerous it can be to focus only on surface appearances.
He's all about fame and looking good, but there's nothing really there.
Exactly. He's a great way to talk about real-world stuff like celebrity culture and the pressure to project a certain image. And then there's the Weasleys. Even though they struggle financially, they're all about love, loyalty, and accepting everyone. The opposite of Malfoy and his pure blood obsession.
And it's not just the parents either, right? Ginny's shyness around Harry tells us something. And Percy being so ambitious hints at where he might end up. Even the twins and their jokes add to the story.
You got it. Every character matters.
Okay, but how does this chapter, chapter 4, connect to the rest of the series? It's not just the standalone adventure, right?
Oh, definitely not. This is where Rowling starts setting up those big themes that'll play out over all 7 books. Good versus evil, prejudice, the power of love and friendship. They all get their start right here.
It's like this chapter's a miniature version of the whole series.
That's a great way to put it. And that's why it's so important to teach. It's not just about what happens in this chapter, it's about how it connects to everything that comes after.
It's like giving students a map to navigate the whole series.
Exactly. And teachers can highlight that by asking questions like, how does the way Lucius treats the Weasleys connect to the bigger conflict between Voldemort and those who oppose him?
It makes them think about those connections, about how individual actions and beliefs contribute to the bigger picture.
Yeah, I know we've talked a lot about the heavy stuff, prejudice, financial struggles, but let's not forget that this chapter is also a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely. The Weasley twins are hilarious.
Right. They bring so much humor to the story. And remember, humor can be a great teaching tool, too. It can help students connect with the material and make it more memorable.
So teachers shouldn't be afraid to embrace the humor and let students have a good laugh.
Exactly. After all, learning should be enjoyable, too. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to emphasize one more thing. All right, picking up where we left off. One of the most important things teachers can do with this chapter is to get those good discussions going in the classroom.
Right. It's not just about memorizing the plot points.
Yeah. Exactly. You want students to really wrestle with the ideas in the text, to analyze, to interpret, to make those connections.
And those discussion questions you provided are so helpful for that. They really get kids thinking about the deeper meaning.
Exactly. So instead of just asking, like, what happened at Flourish and Blots? Or try asking something like, how does that fight between Arthur and Lucius reflect the bigger conflicts in the wizarding world?
It's like taking it to the next level, right?
Yeah.
It makes them think about why those characters clash, not just what happens.
You got it. And a great way to get those discussions going is to break the class into smaller groups. Each group tackles a different question, and then everyone comes back together to share their insights.
Oh, I like that. It gives everyone a chance to participate. Okay, so one of the questions talks about Mr. Weasley being so fascinated by Muggle stuff. That seems like a small thing, but it tells us a lot about him, doesn't it?
Totally. It shows he's open-minded, curious, willing to learn about things that are different from his own world.
He's like the opposite of Lucius Malfoy, who thinks anything Muggle is beneath him.
Absolutely. And that difference gets to the heart of the chapter's themes. Tolerance versus prejudice. Acceptance versus fear of the unknown.
Oh. And another one of the questions asks about Ginny being so clumsy around Harry.
Yeah, it seems like a little detail, but it hints at those feelings she has for him, right? And it foreshadows the bigger role she'll play later on.
It's like those little things Rowling throws in. They always end up being important. Okay, so beyond the discussion questions, you also provided a quiz and some essay topics.
Those are great for checking understanding and getting students to analyze the text in more depth. The quiz is good for those basic facts and the essays.
They really make them dig deeper.
Right. Like, imagine an essay prompt like, Analyze the symbolism of Nocturne Alley. How does Rowling use that setting to foreshadow danger?
It's not just about describing the place, it's about figuring out what it means.
Exactly. Setting can be just as important as characters or plot. It creates mood, foreshadows events, even reflects the character's inner struggles.
So much to think about. Okay, before we wrap up, we have to talk about this whole blood purity thing in the wizarding world. It's a big deal, and it connects to some heavy stuff in the real world.
Yeah, it's sensitive, but it's essential to understanding the conflicts in the series. And Lucius Malfoy, with his pure blood mania, he's like the poster boy for prejudice.
He's just awful to the Weasleys, all because they don't fit his idea of a proper wizarding family.
This chapter really gives teachers a chance to talk about prejudice and discrimination in all its forms. Have students look at what Lucius says, how he acts, and how that impacts others.
It's a lesson about empathy, about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, and those are lessons that go way beyond the classroom.
Couldn't agree more. The magic of Harry Potter isn't just about spells and creatures, it's about friendship, love, courage, and fighting against injustice. Those are themes that resonate with everyone.
Well said. So to all the teachers out there, embrace the magic of this chapter. Let your students explore, discuss, and discover all the amazing things that Harry Potter has to offer.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful. Keep those wands at the ready, and we'll see you next time for another magical exploration.